Go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Caleb Pittman. I'm an attorney with the Richmond office at AppalReD Legal Aid. And here with me is Leigh Moore, also an attorney with the Richmond office of AppalReD Legal Aid.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So as you know, there's a pandemic going on. It's affected all of our lives in many different ways, and that does not exclude court. If you've been to court anytime in the last year, you've probably been on your computer or on your phone. Today, we're going to talk to you about some tips about how to attend court remotely to kind of ease you into that adjustment. First, Caleb's going to go through a few visuals with us about Zoom. That's what we're normally seeing courts use. We want to let you know where the buttons are and what you're seeing as we talk about it. And then at the end, we'd like to answer all your questions. Feel free to drop those in now if you'd like as we go along, or wait till the end and we'll get back to them.
Yes, as Leanne said, the most common type of virtual court we've seen the courts use is through an app called Zoom. And I've got some slides here I'm going to show just to kind of familiarize everyone with the phone version of the app. So you can use Zoom on your computer or on your phone. But most commonly, it seems most convenient for people to be able to use it on their phone. First, I want to note, we'll talk some more about this later, but kind of the first step before you try to download Zoom or anything like that is you should get in contact with your attorney if you have one, or if you're scheduled for court and you don't have an attorney, contact the circuit clerk's office at the courthouse and just check with them as to how they're going to be doing the virtual court. Like we said, Zoom is the most common way that it's done, but sometimes there's some other type of app and you'll need to ask the clerk to be sure which kind you're going to be using. Now, if it is through Zoom, Zoom is available for any type of smartphone. So just go to the app store that your smartphone uses. So the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store if you have an Android. Download the app. And when you open it, you'll see a screen that looks something like this. Now, one of the most important things for setting up Zoom before you go to court is you want to make sure that it's going to show your actual real legal name when you join virtual court. And we'll talk about this again later, but the court prefers for everyone to appear with their real name. That way, when it comes time for the judge to call all the cases, they know who's there and who isn't there. If you don't put your real name in, it often defaults to something like iPhone 10 or something like that. And in that case, you might not hear your case get called and the court might just think that you didn't show up. So in order to make sure that it's going to show your name, ideally you want to make an account first. And to do that, you click the sign up button there that I've circled. That will take you to a page asking for your birth date. Just put in your birth date where it says month, day, and year. And then you'll see a page like this where you put in an email address, your first name, and your last name. The most important thing is just to make sure that it's an email address you can easily check, because it will send you an email asking you to verify that email address. And that'll be easy. You just click on a link in there and that verifies it. And then for first and last name, again, put your real legal name, the name that's going to appear on the court docket, so that when the judge is looking at the cases, they can see that you're there and you're present in court. When you call the clerk's office to check with how they're going to be doing virtual court, you'll want to make sure to give them your email address, and usually they'll ask for a phone number as well. And they will, shortly before court is set to start, they'll send you an email that will have some text, something like this. So it will say, join Zoom meeting, have a link. You should be able to just tap on that link and it will automatically open the Zoom app and take you directly to the court's video call. And when you tap on the link, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't take you to the call, back here where it says meeting ID and passcode, you'll want to just write those down and then open up the Zoom app. And where it says join a meeting, you click on join a meeting. And then you'll put that meeting ID from the email into the box that says meeting ID. And if it doesn't already have your real name in there for some reason, If it says something like Galaxy S9 or S10 or whatever type of phone you have, just replace that with your real name. Then you should be able to just hit join. It will ask for the passcode. You put in the passcode and you'll join the court call. When you get into the court call, it might say something like, you are in a waiting room, please wait for the host to let you in. That is normal. Most courts now are using these things called waiting rooms where they can see that you've joined the call. Everything's fine, but they are trying to let people in as their case is called just to avoid confusion and everything. So you might be in the waiting room for a little while. Once you're let in, you'll see the judge's face and you should be able to hear the judge. And the main things at that point that you'll want to pay attention to is these two buttons at the bottom that I have arrows pointing to. So there's a microphone, and that button will control your microphone. If there's a red line through it, that means you're muted and you need to tap on it to unmute yourself. The button that looks like a video camera, that controls your phone's camera. And the same thing, if there's a red line through it, that means your camera's turned off and you can tap on it to turn on your camera. Ideally, you want to just leave yourself on mute with the video off until the judge calls your case and it's time for you to talk to the judge. At that point, you should unmute yourself and turn on your video so the judge can hear and see you. They prefer to be able to see you if possible when they're listening to you talk. And so with that, that's kind of the basics of how Zoom works. Now, as we mentioned, there are some other possibilities that the court might use. Zoom's the most popular, but I know some courts use other things. Leanne, have you seen any other types of platforms used?
Yes, often other counties are using different platforms such as Skype or Microsoft Teams. I think that Zoom is definitely the most popular that we're seeing the most. Luckily, a lot of the features are pretty universal. They all have mute features, they all have video features. But if you're going to have a hearing that's using something other than Zoom, I would definitely advise you to download it ahead of time or get on their site and familiarize yourself with it before you have court.
Yes, and again, the way you find that out, if you don't have an attorney who can let you know how it's going to work, just call the clerk's office and they will let you know. And any of the platforms I'm aware of, like Skype or Microsoft Teams, they also have versions for your phone, so you can download it to your phone ahead of time if you don't have like a computer with a webcam, and you can try to familiarize yourself with it. And they all also work the same way as far as you'll get an email with the link. You should just be able to tap on that link and it will take you to the call.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, no matter which platform that you're on, make sure you change your name to your full legal name. We don't want the judge to miss you, for your case to get dismissed. You don't want to embarrass yourself because it's some nickname that you maybe use for other purposes. You want to make sure that everybody knows you're there and that you're being professional. That's the first thing that's going to happen with any of the platforms that you're going to use.
Yeah, I have seen it happen before where somebody appears in court, but they appeared under iPhone 12 or something like that, and they had some internet connection problems or something like that. Their case was called, and then they were able to get back into the call later after the case was called, but the judge had already rescheduled it. Now, the judge was understanding, and they did reschedule it, but it did result in a delay. So if that person had their name on there, the judge would not have told the other party to go ahead and leave, and it could have been heard that day. They would have waited to deal with the technical problems.
Yeah. And like Caleb said, you're often going to be in a waiting room when you start out. That would be on Teams, Skype, or on Zoom, like Caleb showed you. Just try to be patient. There's often more than one case besides yours on the docket. The judges are getting through them as fast as they can. I promise we're all working hard to get you in and out of there. Nobody wants to sit around on the computer all day, but we can't move any faster than what allows us to do so in the time we have. So just be patient, wait. If you have some technological glitches, reach out to your attorney or to the clerk's office. But if you're still seeing that waiting room sign, just hold tight and they're going to get to you.
Yeah, and again, the same token, all of them have a mute feature and a feature to turn on and off your video. it is a good idea to leave yourself muted with the video off until your case is called. If you're not in a waiting room and everybody has their video on, it tends to slow down the call, and it just makes things a little bit more hectic looking for the judge to see all these different video screens going. And similarly, if multiple people have themselves unmuted, any sound that happens in your room is going to be coming through, and that can tend to annoy the judges. So keep yourself muted, but be aware that you're muted so that when your case is called, to unmute yourself quickly to let the judge know you're there and that you heard them.
Yes, and on that note, Caleb, I think it's really important for people to remember that this is being recorded. So whether or not you're on mute or whether or not you're on your video, this is something that's being recorded. It's part of the court record. It's the same as if you were in court in person. So be cognitive of that as you're moving forward in your hearing. Another thing with the audio, what if you get on there and you can't hear the audio? I've had cases before where my client was sitting there, we were talking, the judge was talking, and later she told me she couldn't hear what the judge said. I had no idea that my client couldn't hear what the judge said, so I didn't know how to address that with her. You may feel silly to do this, but something as simple as this, or that I can't hear, or even holding up a stick-it note or a piece of paper that says, I can't hear you, at least let the court know that that problem's going on so that they can make sure you have the technology available, or that you can call back in, get back into the meeting, or we can fix whatever the problem is so that you can hear the important things that are going on about your case.
Yeah, you might feel silly or a little bit rude trying to do that, but it's very important to let the judge know. The judge on their end has no way of knowing if you're having a technical problem. And they may think that you're just being silent when they're talking because you're listening and you agree with everything, and they go ahead and order something and you have no idea what they ordered. If the judge doesn't notice you trying to signal that to them, again, kind of the fallback plan for any kind of technical problem is to either reach out to your attorney through an email or text message, or calling them if you have an attorney, or if not, calling the clerk's office. They may not be able to alert the judge immediately that you're having that problem, but that at least lets the court know that you were having a technical problem and you tried to alert them of it as soon as you could.
Definitely. And I think on the same side of that, you may get kicked out of the meeting if your Wi-Fi drops or your cell service drops. If you get kicked out of Zoom or whatever you're on, immediately try to use that link to get back in. You may get put back in a meeting room or waiting room, and you may have to let your attorney or the clerk's office know that. If you're unable to get back in at all, definitely call the clerk or call your attorney. Let them know you're still there, that you didn't just leave.
Yes, with any of the video conferencing options I'm aware of, they all kind of have a backup option of allowing people to just make a normal phone call to reach the meeting. So that is not what judges tend to prefer. They prefer to be able to see people who are in a hearing. I mean, you may be giving sworn testimony, and it's important for the judge to be able to see a witness who's testifying so they can evaluate the testimony better. But there are situations where some people may have no internet, or they have internet, but during the middle of the call, there's a technical problem. So in those cases, you can call the clerk's office. And if you know for sure that you just have no way of getting internet to where you'd be able to do a video call, you can let them know that ahead of time, and they should be able to provide you with a phone number, and you can just call in like you'd call any other phone number, and the judge will let you in, and you can just speak to them over the phone.
Yes, that's always an option. It would be much better to appear by phone than not at all. You never want to miss court. And like Caleb was talking about, if some of these situations come up, the best thing to do is to be proactive about this. Be prepared before court. Know what the clerk's number is, know what your attorney's number is, know which line you have to get through, know your extension, write down the case number that you're being called for in case you call the clerk and they're not sure which docket you're on. Having all that information written down and in front of you is going to help you get access to getting back in should there be a problem.
Right. And we have a lot of kind of more practical tips for how to present yourself in these calls. But one last thing that's maybe a little more technical, but still very important, has to do with submitting evidence over these kinds of virtual court hearings. So, if you have an attorney, again, like with all of these things, it's best to just talk to your attorney ahead of time. If you think you might want to submit documents or pictures, or if you have other witnesses you want to call in court, talk to your attorney about how your judge is going to handle that, because right now, different judges are handling this differently. But if you don't have an attorney, when you call the clerk ahead of time to talk about how to get in on the virtual court, you can let them know that you are wanting to present some kind of evidence, and they may be able to tell you how the judge is going to want you to do that. I've seen some courts are prefer for people to bring that evidence by and bring it to the clerk's office in person if the clerk's office is allowing people to come in for that purpose. There may be an email address they expect you to email any documents or photos to. They, they may send, if you have other witnesses you want to call, they may send each witness their own link to get into court. But that's something you want to talk to the clerk ahead of time about. And some judges may prefer for you to make your initial appearance and describe what kind of evidence you plan to submit, and then they'll reschedule your case and tell you how to go about doing that.
That's definitely some good advice. Every county that has court may be handling things just a little bit differently. So it's good to be proactive and know that information ahead of time. You don't ever want to be precluded from using a video or photographs that you think are necessary for your case. And like Caleb said, we are going to talk about some smaller things, not just about the technology itself, but some tips to help you get through virtual court. The first thing I thought of was your background. I'm sitting today where you can see there's just a plain background behind me and the lighting is okay. You want to make sure that you're seen. You want, when you're communicating with the judge or with your attorney or answering questions, they can see your face, that the lighting's well, that the recording is picking you up, and you want to make sure that you look professional at all times. So lighting and background is really important. And on that note of backgrounds, be leery of filters and like the gimmick backgrounds or any special effects. Most of these platforms do offer that. A lot of people use them. I think we're all familiar probably with the lawyer cat. You don't want to be lawyer cat. You don't want to be a meme on Facebook later. So make sure that's not on before you log in.
Right. And, some of these backgrounds may even appear to be professional backgrounds. I've seen some people use like a virtual kind of office space or like bookshelves behind them. And, those can work. However, depending on the phone you're using or the computer you're using, they don't always work well. And a lot of times it's better just to have a plain wall behind you than it is to have something that looks fancy, but there's going to be technical glitches and you can't see half of your face or something like that. In general, the judge is going to be understanding that not everyone has a professional office, and it's fine for you to be appearing in court from your house, so long as you just try to pick something that looks just as neutral as you can, something that's not going to be distracting. Similarly, you want to have decent lighting. You might not be able to have professional looking lighting, but the main thing you want to avoid is either the room being too dark for you to see or a bright light behind you that's going to cause glare in the camera.
Definitely. And you don't want to be distracting. There's going to be a lot of things happening in court already. You don't want to be distracted because you want to hear what the court's saying to you, but you especially want them to hear what you have to say. And a big distraction is when you're moving around a lot. I have been in court before where one of the parties is walking and carrying their phone and talking on Zoom, and the judges can't listen to you if you're moving like that. Everything's muffled. They can't hear you. It's not clear and it's not professional. I think we know that, but there are times you're going to have to move around. But when you're speaking to the court, you need to be still. And hopefully it goes without saying, but please don't call while you're driving. You may have to take a break from work and be sitting in your car, but please do not drive. We've seen this, and please know that that is illegal, right, Caleb?
Absolutely. I've seen a surprising amount of people in court, virtually driving in their car with their cell phone in their lap, and it's very obvious that they're driving too. Typically, if you've got your cell phone propped somewhere while you're driving, you're going to be able to see out the window. You can see things moving by. The judge is aware you're driving. Not only is it very distracting and going to upset the judge for that reason, but it's illegal and irresponsible. And so you're, at the very minimum, giving the judge a bad impression of yourself. And on that note, also, as far as distractions go, uh, try to keep things silent or at least background noise to a minimum. You may think that some of the background noise is too quiet for the microphone to pick up, but you'd be surprised sometimes what gets picked up and what might be distracting. Um, Also, just if at all possible, I mean, treat it like you were in a courtroom. When you go into a courtroom, they tell you to turn off your devices. At the very least, make sure they're silenced. Though turning them off is usually the safest way to make absolutely sure that you're not going to be getting a phone call or text or something while you're in court. In general, the judges are pretty understanding that this is difficult for everybody. So, like Leanne said, if you absolutely have to be in court from your car, that's fine. But, try to the extent that you can, show the same respect that you would if you were in a courtroom as far as keeping your devices silenced and making sure there's not going to be any interruptions.
Yes, interruptions are a big part of court now that it's virtual. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest disruptions that I see and that also happens to me is having your pets in your room. If you're doing this from home, your pets live there too. We understand that. I have 2 cats. They love to crawl across this keyboard when I'm talking to somebody. I think they think it's their show. But you need to make sure that your dogs are somewhere where they're not going to bark or your cats aren't crawling all over your desk. I mean, you need to be as professional as possible. And that's not something you may not, that you may not think about before court starts until they're actually actively in the presence of your computer or your device. So ahead of time, make sure that your pets are somewhere secure, that they're safe, but also that they're not going to be in the way during your hearing.
Yeah, that's right. You may have a very well behaved pet. My pets are pretty well behaved, but if they're around and it's going to be inconvenient for me, my dogs will suddenly hear something outside and start barking uncontrollably. So better to, try to put yourself in a room where if your pets are acting up, it's not going to be heard and they're not going to have an opportunity to, um, get behind you or get in front of you in the camera and distract the court. And really, in general, if it's possible, you should try to find a room where you're by yourself. Now, many people have children, and getting childcare right now during this pandemic is very difficult, and they may be in school, but school's being held virtually. Um, so it may be unavoidable that you have to be in the room with your children, but if at all possible, try to make sure you're in a room separately from the children. There's someone else watching them. The children are safe and being taken care of. Court may last longer than you think it's going to. So it can be important to, if you can, get some kind of childcare for them. Though again, if not, it is always better to appear in court with your baby next to you than it is to not appear. The judge will understand if you have no other option. Just try to make sure that, again, the number one rule is you're being as respectful as you can given your circumstances.
Absolutely. And not just your children and your pets. It's best to be in the room alone, if at all possible. If you have an attorney, they may ask you to come to their office to attend virtually with them. If not, and you're representing yourself, or if you're with an attorney but appearing from home, it's better to not have the distraction of someone being in the room. And there's also the possibility you may want that person to be a witness. They don't need to be in the room with you if they're going to be a witness. That's something that would go on in a normal courtroom. They wouldn't be there to hear your testimony before they testify. So just keep that in mind, that you don't want to preclude your own witnesses by having them in the room with you, hearing everything that's going on before you want the court to speak with them as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, you should have them be in another room, and then when the court tells you that you can have that witness appear and they're willing to hear their testimony, the court will give you a minute to go and get the person and bring them in if that person isn't able to just log in from their own device. Similarly, as far as being respectful and not causing any distractions, it's tempting when you're at court from home, and sometimes you may be in a waiting room for court for a long period of time, waiting for your case to be called. And, court is often scheduled, say, at 9 a.m. or early afternoon when people would normally might be eating breakfast or eating lunch. So you might be tempted to grab a bite to eat. But really, you don't know when you're going to be called, and you want to avoid having a plate of food in front of you, or having your mouth full or something like that when your case is called. So again, try to treat it like it is an actual court hearing in person, where you would eat ahead of time or wait to eat afterwards, rather than eating in the courtroom. And by the same token, I think for a lot of people this would go without saying, but I have seen it in court. Avoid taking smoke breaks while you're waiting for your case to be called. The judges tend to not take it very well when someone appears on screen and they're sitting on their front porch smoking a cigarette while they're trying to talk to the court.
Definitely. And like Caleb said, it's easy for us to be comfortable in our own environments. It's much different to sit here in my home than to sit in the courtroom and be in the presence of everyone else. And on that note, the way I'm most comfortable is usually when I'm sitting at home in my pajamas. However, do not do that. Please do not do that. You need to address appropriately still when you're attending court virtually. This is recorded. This is a professional appearance. This is the same as if you were in the courtroom. You want to look professional. You want to look respectful. Caleb, do you have some ideas of what you would recommend for people, what to wear to court?
Yes. So, if you have the clothes to dress fancy and put on a tie and a sport coat or something like that, you're certainly welcome to do that. The judges tend to understand that, they might expect attorneys to dress that way, but they generally don't expect the parties appearing in court to all be dressed up super nice. However, if you're a man, generally some kind of long sleeve button up shirt, it might be a plaid shirt or just a plain shirt. That tends to give the judge a good impression that you're, at least not dressing super casually. If you don't have a shirt like that, or say a polo shirt with a collar, you can wear a t-shirt. Just make sure that it doesn't have any kind of graphics or like sarcastic sayings on it. I've seen people show up in court with things that say something like, I really didn't want to be here today. And, if you're not thinking about it, you might just throw that shirt on in the morning and you don't give two thoughts about it. The judge may take that as some kind of backhanded remark against the court. So, not only, can some graphics and things like that be distracting, but it might also give the judge the impression that you're just not taking this seriously. So dress in something that's relatively plain and nice looking, but you don't have to look like you're an attorney. Also, avoid wearing any hats. That's a rule. If you were in physical courtroom, you're not supposed to wear a hat. And so similarly, in a virtual court, you shouldn't be wearing a hat.
Definitely. And just keep in mind, being respectful is going to get you so much further, not just in court, but in life, especially when we're talking about technology and appearing remotely in virtual court. There are going to be kinks, there are going to be problems, and there is usually a lag. There's usually a playover, and that things are moving a little slower technically than what might be happening in real time. So be really aware of whether or not you're talking over people. I am very guilty of this myself. I get excited and I want to say things and I accidentally interrupt because I think someone's over with what they're saying. You want to give them time to finish. You want to make sure you especially don't talk over the judge. You might miss some really crucial information about your case, or that you don't want to jump over questions. I mean, like Caleb keeps saying, and like I've said, this is like being in court. Don't speak over any other witnesses. Don't try to make your own objections while people are talking and they haven't finished their part of the story yet, especially when you have an attorney that should be doing that kind of thing for you. But not interrupting will go a long way. And it's really hard not to interrupt sometimes using these platforms because of that lag we see with the technology, especially if you're having trouble with a slow internet connection. Sometimes stuff can be jumbled up and you may not be hearing well what's going on. Just try to wait until there's a pause before you speak.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And it can be hard to tell if you're talking over somebody because of the lag. But right, I think if you wait about a second or so before you start speaking, that should help mitigate that. But kind of on the same note, there are a lot of technological glitches and things, and it's still a relatively new process for the courts and the attorneys and everybody involved. Even though this has been going on for getting close to a year now, the courts have been using different technology in this time, changing the way that they schedule things, the way that they run the technology. This was not something that the courts commonly used before this. So all of the staff and everybody are still getting trained up on doing everything properly. And because of that, there may be delays in court. It's not uncommon to see some significant delays. Even when court was in person, you could have situations where you have a hearing scheduled in the early afternoon. There were things scheduled in the morning, and for whatever reason, the morning court runs into the afternoon. The same thing happens with virtual court, and it's compounded by technological problems too. The court may have some kind of error and they have to reconnect everybody. And so because of that, you might be waiting in a waiting room for a long time, and say the judge gets to your case and has to tell you that they're rescheduling it because there just isn't enough time. That is understandably very frustrating. If you might have taken the day or half the day off work to come to court, and then you find out you've got another court date. Just keep in mind that the main thing is you want to show respect to the judge, and keep in mind that everybody is learning with this process. You don't want the judge to have a bad impression of you. So while it may be very frustrating, just make sure that you pay attention to what the next court date is. Let the judge know if for some reason there's no way you can make that date work. The judge will probably try to work with you to reschedule for a time that works. And remember to always address them as your honor or sir or ma'am.
Definitely, I agree. And being patient is just so important. I'm sure you guys have heard this a million times during this pandemic. We're all in this together. We don't necessarily like virtual court or all the problems that it can present any more than you do, but we can get through this. We've hoped that today's tips have helped you understand what's going to happen and give you some insight on how that you should act in court and how to access that. Caleb, do you have anything else, or do you think we might have any questions?
I think we were going to open it for questions. I'm not sure if we have any yet. I think we've pretty much addressed everything, but to kind of re-emphasize the main highlights, I think the main important things to take away is to be proactive, contact the court clerk ahead of time, find out how they're doing virtual court, make sure they have your contact information. If you have problems connecting, get back in contact with them, let them know, see what they want you to do. They may want you to call in. They may tell you just to keep trying to reconnect. Above all, be respectful in court. Try your best to pretend that you are in a real courtroom. Dress the way you would for going to court in person. Address the judge as your honor or sir. Have the same respect you would if it was a real courtroom.
Yes, definitely. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need legal assistance, you can always call us.
Yes. The one other thing I think that does bear repeating is to minimize background noise. That's something I think bears repeating just because it's the sort of thing that can easily be overlooked if you just think that it's not something that's going to show up over the microphone. Oh, I think we do have a question coming in, actually. Okay, so someone mentioned that they have 3 children and they just moved to an area where they don't know anyone who can act as a sitter. So they're asking for any tips. I think, just off the top of my head, I would say part of this kind of depends on how old the children are. I mean, if you have older children, you may be able to trust them to stay in another room, kind of set something up so that they are occupied and safe, and leave you some time alone. But of course, if you have very young children, that's not really a possibility. In all the courtrooms I've been in, I think the judges are pretty understanding of that. You may just want to bring that up as soon as your case is called. Just say, Your Honor, I'm sorry, I don't have a sitter, so my children are in here with me, but I wanted to make sure I showed up in court and I didn't have another option. And the judge will be understanding about that. You just, to the extent that you can, want to make sure that the children are as quiet as is reasonable.
I agree with Caleb. I think that what he said about letting the court know that that's going on is extremely important. Depending on what kind of case you have, you may be talking about something that's very sensitive. And there are things you're not going to want to say in front of your children. And there are things that the court would be upset if you said in front of your children. So if you let the judge know ahead of time that there may be children nearby, they may ask you to take time to make alternative arrangements before you can have your hearing. And I know that's hard. I know childcare is hard, especially during this pandemic, but just remember little ears. There are things that aren't appropriate for them and the courts won't want them in the room. So disclosing that children are nearby is very important before your hearing begins.
Yes, I think the person clarified their children are very young, 6, 3, and 1. And so, yeah, I think the judge would be more upset if you were to leave a 1-year-old in a room by themselves, being watched after by a 6-year-old while you're in court potentially for several hours, waiting for your case to be called. So, of course, in those situations, the safety of your children comes first. If they have to be in the room with you, they have to be. But just like Leanne said, if you bring it up to the judge initially, that helps prevent it from being a situation where you're in the middle of talking and your 1-year-old starts crying and the judge wasn't even aware there was a child in the room. You want to bring it up ahead of time so the judge knows this child's in the room. There's a possibility that there might be some interruption. The judge is prepared for it. And the judge can tell you if they think it's appropriate for this to go on while the children are in the room, or if they're going to tell you that this needs to be rescheduled. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. Okay, so with that said, as Leanne said before, if for people who are watching this later, or if you have a question later, or if you have some kind of legal need or court scheduled and you don't have an attorney, or there's a legal need you have that you think you might need to go to court over, or you might need legal advice about, we can help you with that advice. So we are AppalReD Legal Aid. We are a free service for civil legal matters. So if you've got a criminal case, we don't do criminal cases. If you can't afford an attorney and you have a criminal case, the public defender's office handles that. And you should let your judge know that you can't afford an attorney, and they will appoint the public defender's office to represent you. But if you have a non-criminal legal issue, we may be able to help with that. There's multiple legal aid services in Kentucky that cover different regions. So we provide representation and advice to 37 counties in eastern and south central Kentucky. So our offices are located in Richmond, Prestonsburg, Pikeville, Somerset, Barberville, and Hazard. And we service this county surrounding those. There's too many counties for me to list them all, but if you click through to our Facebook page, there's a link to our website where you can see a map that shows the counties we service. And if we don't service your county, there is another legal aid society in your area that would offer the same kinds of services.
Absolutely. And like Caleb said, we can give you advice or perhaps represent you on any type of civil matter. And civil just means that it's not criminal, like Caleb said. We do a lot of family law work. We do divorce and custody cases, and we do domestic violence cases. I think it's important that you guys be aware that that's not the only thing that we do. We do a lot of other cases, actually, and maybe that's not something the public always knows about. We do housing law cases that would include foreclosures, evictions, disputes with your landlord, loss of utilities. We also do bankruptcy and debt collection, which would include unfair collection practices, garnishments, repossessions. You can call us about any of those matters. We do benefits work. We work with Social Security benefits, public benefits like SNAP, food stamps, Medicaid, Medicare, KTAP. If you're experiencing issues with any of your benefits like that, please give us a call. We also work with unemployment appeals. We work with expungements, which are civil cases, even if they stem from a criminal case. And we also work in tax law. And with that said, I do want to make you aware that we have a low-income taxpayer clinic in our Richmond office, but it services all of AppalReD. We have an attorney, Scott Davies, that's extremely knowledgeable about tax law. And if you receive a letter from the IRS, any communications from them or you have a question about tax, please give us a call and ask to talk to them as well.
That's right. And as I mentioned, our contact information is available on our Facebook page, but our website is www.ardfky.org. You can actually apply for our services through the website. And as I mentioned before, you can see where our coverage area is. But also we have a central intake line you can call, essentially describe your problem to someone on that line, and they'll let you know if we might be able to help you. And they can also provide you with legal advice, even if we can't actually represent you. And that number is 866-277-5733. And with that, I think that's everything about virtual court for today. Again, if you've got any legal issues or questions, feel free to reach out to us. And otherwise, everyone have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Legal aid provides assistance to people who don't have the money to hire an attorney to help them present their case. When we recite the Pledge of Allegiance, we end with, and justice for all. And that's what legal aid does. Legal aid helps make that promise a reality in the United States, so that justice is for all and not just for the few who can afford it.
There's no way in the world I could have afforded to get legal representation if I had to pay. And so, you know, when you get the type of representation that I got, and it's a nonprofit organization, I don't really know if there's any words that can describe how much that means to a woman coming out of an abusive relationship with 2 children. You know, can you really put a price on your and your children's safety? And so I'm just really grateful.
She had filed this domestic violence petition alleging that her now ex-husband had followed her state to state. And so she had moved to Kentucky for a support system, and he showed up randomly. And that's when she became terrified because of the history of domestic violence.
I've had to go to court many times by myself, and the anxiety and the paranoia and just the physical illness that you feel, terrified that you step. No one should ever have to go into a courtroom without representation. No one. We don't know all the legal mumbo jumbo. There's times when I was in court with her where we get out of court and I was like, what? And she's had to explain to me, you know, what was said, because when you get into all that legal talk, for someone like me, you're speaking alien.
I feel like it makes the community better because we're able to go to court and hold people accountable and ensure that the justice system is a little more fair.
I mean, I remember after I sat down with her for the first time and just did a consult, I cried for about an hour in my car down the road. Because it was, I don't want to get emotional. It was the first time somebody cared. It was the first time I had like a beacon of hope.
You are entitled to an attorney in criminal cases. Unfortunately, that does not spread to civil cases. So it can be very scary for someone to encounter one of these lawsuits and know that they have no right to counsel.
My husband ended up having emergency heart surgery, and they was not sure if he would survive or not. So I ended up halfway through my mortgage, and then the mortgage company decided that I would not re-qualify for the balance of my mortgage. So I started making phone calls to get help to not lose my home. This was my inheritance, was this piece of property. I feel like it's my heritage, and they were going to take it away from me. It doesn't give them a right, because they have more money than me, to come after me. and people don't have a recourse. People feel that I did not feel that I had a recourse at the time. I could not afford to pay thousands of dollars out an attorney. I'm trying to save my house. If I can't pay the house, I can't pay a big high-dollar attorney bill. So then we started a bankruptcy proceeding, which stopped them from coming. In the meantime, while I was in this proceeding, though, the mortgage company sent a person out here to my home while my husband still had stitches in his chest to put a lock on the house. And I did not even have a court order. And I said, get off my property. When my grown children stepped up and helped, and if we hadn't had them, I couldn't have made it by myself. Between them and AppalReD, the good Lord above, that's what saved us.
My 21st birthday, I landed on Eglin Air Force Base. So I served 4 years active duty there on Eglin. I traveled all over the United States, and I got to do one tour in Saudi, 129 days. I don't particularly care for that one, but it gave me experience. In 1999, I had my son, and I decided to not renew my contract with the Air Force, and so in December of 1999, I got out, came back home. I had to have a surgery, and so I had to take some time off work and couldn't do a whole lot there for a while, so I got behind on financial matters, the Jeep being one. Actually, it was 14 days past the due date, and he took my vehicle. I called the police, first of all, and then as they were talking to me, and they said, well, is it financed? And I said, well, yeah, but I mean, it's not 30 days late. He agreed to take my payment, and nowhere in my imagination did I think that he had took my car. So they checked into it, and sure enough, it had been repossessed illegally.
When I talked to the man who owned the car dealership, I didn't say anything to him really other than this is the law.
She was something, let me tell you. She didn't let him mow her or plow over her like he did me.
So I'm always happy to sometimes explain the law to a car dealer if I need to, and that day I think he heard me loud and clear, so we were glad.
The day we signed the contract and I drove off in my Jeep, it was like, I know it's not the most beautiful vehicle, but to me it is, because it was a battle getting it back. I only have 2 more payments. I will have the title free and clear on my Jeep, which is wonderful to me.
The need for our services in our community is overwhelming, and unfortunately, based on the resources that we have, it's not uncommon that we have to turn people away for services.
People go into court, face the loss of their home, maybe the loss of income, the loss of custody of a child, maybe the loss of health coverage, any variety of very important and life-changing interests that are at stake. And anybody with money would never face those kinds of issues without an attorney. One of the things that drew me to legal aid was the opportunity to work for the powerless, for the forgotten, for those who have no one else to stand with them. And we at Legal Aid, we are there to stand with those people who have no one else. And I continue after 20 years of doing this to be so proud to be a part of this legal aid community that does so much every day for people when they face these kinds of problems without lawyers.